This is Terror House Radio with Matt Forney and Bryden Proctor.
Yeah, welcome to Terror House Radio, episode number 57. I'm Matt Forney, your charming and loquacious host, and the founder and editor-in-chief of Terror House Press. My co-host and producer and the world's only comedian, Bryden Proctor, will not be joining us this episode. He's still recovering from his journey down to Peru to partake in the ayahuasca plant. Send him your energy, and he will appreciate it very much, I'm sure. My guest for this program is Matt Pegas. He is the co-host of The Stark Truth with Robert Stark, and most importantly, for the purposes of this interview, he is the author of Dragon Day. Terror House's next book release will be out this Friday. A novel about inceldom, a novel about political extremism, a novel that's very funny and very dark and very relevant to the situation that we find ourselves in. Matt, welcome to the show.
Excellent to be here. Great to talk to you in person, Matt.
Yes. Before we get anything, I want to get this out of the way quickly. This was, I guess it is the start of season 2 of Terror House Radio. We kind of moved to a new live format due to Bryden's extended break. We had rotating guest hosts during the period where he was away. We had Eris on when Andy Nowicki was on in March. Then we had Ben Welton co-hosting when we had Ralph Monday on in April. They were kind of like the remember how in between Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and Power Rangers Zero there was that little Mighty Morphin Alien Rangers miniseries. Like Eris and Ben were kind of like the Mighty Morphin Alien Rangers of Terror House Radio. They're a supremely geeky reference that only 90 kids are going to be able to understand. But there you have it. But season 2 has officially begun now with a new theme song and a new announcer. Thank you to Katya Dag and Zero Pulse for their wonderful contributions. And another thing, if you have questions for Matt or myself, you can, of course, send them to streamlabs.com/terrorhouse magazine, and we will read them later on the show. Now, let's get into it. Matt, I always do this with my first-time interview guests. It's always good to let the interview subject kind of define themselves and in their own words. So for the people in the audience who don't know who you are, can you just kind of give a brief overview of yourself, your work, that kind of thing?
Yeah, sure thing. So Dragon Day is my first novel. I've been writing it for a long time. I have a day job, which I won't get into here. But, I have writerly ambitions, of course, and which Terror House has helped bring into fruition. I think I've posted about this a bit. I went to a pretty good school for undergrad, studied philosophy and English. I've always been a very academically oriented kind of person. Philosophy is definitely an interest, and I would say that Dragon Days is a somewhat philosophical novel, though I hope that wouldn't turn off people who aren't as into philosophy, because I hope it's not pretentious either. I think it's pretty entertaining. And as you mentioned in the intro, I co-host The Stark Truth with Robert Stark. That was a venture I started after college. I was basically what you'd call a normie in college for the most part, and kind of fell down the rabbit hole of the online dissident sphere after college, mostly through Robert's podcast, actually. And the influence of that, as well as the influence of where I went to school and what I studied, I think is very apparent on the novel. But yeah, that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't call the novel pretentious. It's very relatable, though it does go into these subjects. You want to give it kind of an overview of the novel, what it's about. I mean, obviously don't spoil anything, but
sure.
Just introduce Dragon Day to the prospective audience and sell them on it as to why they should buy it, and maybe buy 2 copies so they can wear one around their neck.
Oh yeah, they should buy 3, 4, or even 5. But what I used to call the log line, which is more of a filmic term, but it applies. What I used to say with the log line was a troubled young college student, a college freshman, falls under the influence of a professor with dangerous ideas. And to elaborate a bit, dangerous ideas in this case, I think you pitched this a little bit in some of your tweets leading up to this show, The novel could be seen as a send up, both of the far left and also the alt right, and the certain degree of overlap between all political extremism as a sort of psychosexual force that can often influence particularly young men, if that makes any sense. It's very much the dangerous side. I say it's a young college freshman falls under the influence of a professor with dangerous ideas. Those dangerous ideas are ideas of a certain apocalyptic flavor, very much influenced by the real-time news cycle and the kind of ideas one might find kicking around online in the context of the 2010s.
Yeah, it's something that I would say comes from I don't know if I want to say experience, but like a deep knowledge of the subject matter. Because Terror House has actually published a number of works in this vein before. I mean, obviously we've republished several works by Andy Nowicki, such as The Columbine Pilgrim and Under the Nihil, that kind of approached the whole, desperate incel, nothing left to lose kind of mentality. We published another book by Jay Black called Gutter Snipe in April, which was inspired by the 1996 Atlanta Olympic bombings. Dragon Day is very much in the same vein as those works, but it's more what's the word I'm looking for? Well, it's more contemporary. It's more contemporary, and it shows kind of a
familiarity.
Yeah, familiarity.
Yeah, I mean, if I can't boast of anything else, I would certainly boast of a familiarity both with what it was like to go to college as a young white male in the 2010s. Obviously, that was 4 years of my life. And then I'm also would pride myself on being pretty well read and versed in a variety of currents of dissident online discourse, ranging from, the different corners of the alt-right, of course, it became a fascination of mine for a long time, but also dirtbag left and people who are really interested in Camille Paglia, Bronze Age perverts work. It continues to be an obsession to continue to read all of this stuff, not just the stuff that I agree with, obviously, but I'm pretty cued into just about everything that's going on, or I try to be.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's yet another. I don't want to talk about this like it's some kind of good thing, but it's an interesting synchronicity. This week we have in the news there was that I think it was in Texas. This guy got picked up because he was arrested because he was planning to shoot up a Walmart, and there's the pictures of all the of his apartment, and he's got like all the Satanist shit. He's got the chaos flag. He had a copy of Mike Ma's Harassment Architecture on his fucking shrine.
I was definitely looking at the books.
Did you see that?
Yeah, I haven't read Mike Ma myself, so I didn't recognize that one. The thing that jumped out at me was Revolt Against the Modern World, right next to the Turner Diaries. And I haven't read the Turner Diaries, but my impression is those are actually pretty different kinds of books, but it's easy to imagine how a certain personality could sort of take all of it way too seriously. And I agree. I mean, I don't think the protagonist of my novel, Toby is his name, is necessarily quite cut from that cloth, but nevertheless, I think that you're right that a major theme in the novel is not only being interested in radical politics, but also the occult sort of underpinnings of some of the really fringe stuff. So yeah, I saw that you tweeted that about how, there is some synchronicity to this news story happening the same week the book comes out. And I would agree. I immediately recognize the sort of manic sort of ideology that could underpin the kind of lone wolf obsessive.
Well, I mean, it's worth pointing out that in this particular case, this guy is I believe he was affiliated with the Base, which is the Base is literally a Fed group. The guy who runs it has an active cage code. If those of you who don't know what that is, cage codes are for government contractors, active government contractors. This is a terrorist group run by a guy who basically is who basically has a security clearance from the CIA. Like and in fact, this guy has said in the past that he's fine with working with feds on the basis of, well, they can just help us create more chaos, and that's a good thing. So I would like to put that element out there. But the general element of these philosophies, what this guy was espousing, and the base is basically a rebrand of Atomwaffen, if you're familiar with that.
Oh yeah,
Atomwaffen, the join your local Nazis group that was going around killing people. Atomwaffen is basically it's literally a Satanist group, and their entire philosophy is about causing chaos.
Not to jump in here, but like those are the deeper, darker waters that I became interested in. By the way, obviously not advocating. I think a lot of this shit's abhorrent and illegal, etc. But just intellectually, I became, starting with the basic alt-right stuff, slowly became a lot more interested in what I would term the deeper, darker waters where, because at face value, the dissident right, the alt-right was a either secular but often Christian and tied in with American nationalism kind of movement. But if you look at the deeper waters, there is a very, very rich pagan sort of undercurrent, and even Satanist undercurrent, which is where I think, just intellectually, some of the most interesting stuff is. And you talked about, well, we're really diving into the deep end of talking about some of this stuff, but you talked about Atomwaffen. There's also a group called the Order of Nine Angles, which I don't know if it's advisable for me to be talking about this on live radio, but nevertheless, it is definitely an intriguing development out of the UK, and the person who's in charge, and this is long-standing too, by the way. I think Atomwaffen's actually associated with them. This guy, David Myatt, who is basically a Satanist Nazi, and that became an inspiration for some of the darker undercurrents that I presented in my novel as well.
Yeah, I mean, going over the history of this is like too long and kind of boring for a podcast. But I'll try and give kind of an overview as to the currents as to how this happened. Well, one of the speculations I had with a friend years ago, of why Satanism and Nazism got kind of married in the minds of certain mentally deranged individuals, is the idea that we live in a post-Christian society. Society couldn't be described as Christian in any sense, but it's still very religious in a broader sense. And the modern, the worst person as, defined by the mainstream media and public opinion, the worst person ever is Adolf Hitler. And in the minds of a certain individual, well, Adolf Hitler is Satan. Satan is good. Satan gives us power. To kind of go into the deeper currents of that, you mentioned the Order of the Nine Angles. That's derived from the name. I'm not familiar with the group specifically, but the name and the ideas come from Aleister Crowley, and occultist who
there's definitely an association there. And Crowley makes his way into the novel later. But go on. Yes.
Crowley was, if you've read his writings, I really don't advise getting it too deep into it. This stuff is, even if you think it's ridiculous, it's really kind of sick. Crowley literally said that anal sex was the gateway to satanic power. Like literally, you get fucked up the ass, and you're making a covenant with Satan, and then you'll get satanic power. And there's all kinds of, shall we say, problematic stuff. Like he, said that black people possess satanic power, which is something that more liberal Satanists are kind of trying to sweep under the rug now, but
liberal Satanists are ridiculous, but continue.
But how this connects to neo-Nazism is, in the 1960s, there was a book published called The Morning of the Magicians, a really terrible fucking book that alleged that Aleister Crowley and Adolf Hitler were working together during World War II. A lot of that is where that whole, the trope of like an Indiana Jones of like the Nazis seeking out all this occultic power and whatnot.
Yeah,
that's where it comes from. It comes from The Morning of the Magicians and a lot of works that were published around that time period. Now, there's no evidence to suggest that Crowley and Hitler ever even so much as shook hands. But to a certain personality type, I mean, a lot of it is we don't live in reality anymore in a sense. We live in a hyper reality, and I'm sure you know this as well as anyone else, Matt. A good lie can really just take root in people's minds and just be more compelling than the truth. So if you already have kind of a mentally deranged person, you can read something like The Morning of the Magicians or the countless copy pastes of Crowleyist ideas that have come down through the decades, filtered down through the lowest common denominator, and you can think Nazi Satanist. Let's go have a ritual in the woods where we all have gay sex, and then we'll go and cause chaos throughout the world. This makes sense to a certain personality type.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there's very few people who completely fit that mold of full-on gay satanic Nazi, but there's enough examples of people who sort of point generally in the direction of that kind of behavior that kept me feeling like I was writing about a current of thought. I'll say a current of thought. I'm pretty sure the people who practice this kind of thing would think I was talking about a current in a magical sense, but that this exists and that it's an undercurrent in the actual alt-right, and has been a current in various nationalist and occultist movements, in a very esoteric and sort of under the surface level. And just to comment also on what you said, Crowley is definitely relevant to all of this. And I am no expert on him. I've read a little bit, and I've read a little bit about him. But the basic idea of do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the whatever it is. It is absolutely relevant, and I talk about it as there's an element of the 60s sort of leftist counterculture that sometimes openly flirted with Crowleyism, and since the time that those progressive forces of the 60s have gained cultural power over Christianity, because as you said at the beginning, we are living in post-Christian times, I've observed that the power of transgression, the power of the do what thou wilt element has sort of, if not switched sides, because it never has a side, has become a more powerful weapon in the hands of those who oppose the current order now, which is no longer a Christian current order, but rather the globalist current order, or whatever you want to call it. But that was one element that kept me very intrigued throughout writing Dragon Day, and something even before I got interested in the online dissident sphere was a kind of something I was starting to pick up in college, was that the left wing, the progressive end of things, that become so lame and protective of itself. But there was these other sort of crazier elements in society that were rebelling against that. Obviously embodied in extreme things like the Atomwaffen and Order of Nine Angles we were talking about. But even you see that in someone like Milo, who was just getting popular at the end of my time in college, who, gay, and has this element of do it that well, or even not even to put it in those terms, has this element of, I'll do whatever I want, even just the dandy,
just utter chaos. And, that symbolized Milo, to a T up until relatively recently.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and it's the chaos is another relevant concept here. And the cover of the book has the chaos star on it, which Dugin uses over in Russia, but it's also a symbol associated with other things. So the role of chaos in this kind of philosophy, or this kind of set of ideas we're describing is highly relevant, because the way that people formulate this as a political ideology, it's not chaos for its own sake. You tend to tap into sort of Kali Yuga type thinking, or thinking in terms of age and thinking in terms of regeneration and cycles, like the phoenix rising from the ashes, so to speak. The type of thing that one is apt to, that one comes across is this idea of, and I lay out explicitly in the book, is this idea of sowing as much chaos as possible. So there's the idea that this golden age can be reborn off the back of destruction. So just to clarify, that's often the political upshot. It's not just chaos for its own sake, but rather the idea.
They have this idea that in order for a new order to emerge, everything has to be burned away, metaphorically or literally, which is where the chaos comes in.
Exactly. And what's interesting is, this is not just one. This isn't just one like group of people that talk in these terms. Like, this is stuff that you can pick up on from a variety of a dissident right and occultist sources.
Yes, and it's something I observed myself when when I was involved with the alt-right years ago. It's something. It's something that's difficult to initially notice if you're not familiar with it, but once you kind of get acquainted with these ideas, you'll suddenly see it everywhere. I mean, you almost start to go, Russell Crowe in A Beautiful Mind style. It's like, oh my God, this and that, whatever. One of the things I noticed about these people is, not to get too prurient here. For some reason, like I said, it always goes back to gay sex. Like I said, with the whole Crowleyite notion that anal sex is a gateway to satanic power. One of the more funnier incidents of this type was this was, I think, in 2016. Someone uncovered a secret website that Richard Spencer had been building, an organization called Phoenix that was going to be hosting retreats for young men in the mountains of West Virginia. I'm not going to cast any aspersions here, but I once spoke to I used to be friends with an Australian man who was involved in a neo-Nazi gang when he was a teenager. He got out of that because he and his friend were in it, and the two of them discovered that they were the only members of this gang that had not been fucked in the ass by the leadership. Like, that's literally what these guys were doing. They were they'd get these vulnerable boys from broken homes. My former friend here was raised by a single mother, and they whisper, they would act kind of like father figures, to these kind of lost boys, and would whisper all sweet nothings in their ears, kind of crank it up with the the praise, etc. And then eventually it becomes, let's go to the woods.
Yeah.
And then the older guy would start sucking their cock or something. It's like, Hitler did this. The Nazis did this. Don't you want to honor Hitler?
Oh yeah, no, that doesn't surprise me in the slightest. I mean, you come across it more and more. I mean, and I don't think it's a conspiracy theory either, because I don't really care. I didn't get interested in this because I was like, because I cared if there was like gay Nazis in the alt-right or anything. But as I, looked into it more and more, it's just so ubiquitous. As to why that is, I do think it's fascinating. I wrote some articles about it on an old blog of mine called altofcenter.com, terming it Homonationalism. Those were written a little while ago, so I don't necessarily stand by everything I said or even remember everything I said in them. But it continues to be a topic of interest. Bronze Age Pervert actually just did a pretty interesting podcast on what he called the gay question. And I think that his insights, you'd have to listen to the podcast through his Gumroad, but his insights were definitely interesting. And a lot of what I've written and thought about in the past also comes from Camille Paglia. And just the general idea of male bonding, shall we say, especially in the context of the hyper atomized, contemporary world, how men meeting each other on that plane, even if it starts as a sexual fetish, nevertheless have this tendency towards building a certain kind of fraternal bond, shall we say, that can be hard to come by elsewhere.
That's one of the big appeals of these groups. A lot of the guys who are getting involved in it just don't have anywhere else to go. They're kind of I don't want to say weird or whatever. I mean, most people I met in the alt-right were more or less harmless. It's just average dudes, maybe a little weird, maybe a little nerdy. It's like, that's not a fun crime, but like they didn't. they may come from broken homes. They may, just have difficulty making friends in the real life. They may just have difficulty, getting. They just may feel alienated from their surroundings, and then these groups come along and offer the kind of the male camaraderie and friendship that they've been lacking in their personal lives.
For sure.
And then one thing leads to another, and then they're in the woods doing some kind of weird fucking gay Satanist sex ritual.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's the norm, but I'm sure it's happened. As you said, it happened to your Australian friend. It's a thing. But to get clear on like the terms trying to lay out here, I mean, I don't think that's like all that the dissident right is by a long shot.
No.
I think that it's a significant undercurrent. And another like blurbable little thing that I had thought of with regard to my novel is that with the antagonist is a character named Professor Wallingford, who engages in some of the behavior Matt and I have been describing. And who is Wallingford? I wanted to create, in the vein of a lot of great literature that inspires me, I wanted to create a villain who would be intriguing enough and compelling enough that like you could almost side with him. I mean, he's obviously bonkers, but I wanted to make him compelling enough that that people would want to go along for the ride of what he had to say. And it's not like I was thinking about this while I was writing it necessarily, but after the fact, I think what Professor Wallingford in the book is an encapsulation of all the most pagan and decadent elements that I've observed in the alt-right, for better or worse. Because I'm not necessarily fully like I dismiss all of these, and we have to rid the world of idolatry or whatever. But I did want to just concentrate those pagan. The words I use are pagan and decadent, and if you've read Camille Paglia, you'd know, there's obviously a connection between paganism and decadence. So I wanted to, condense all of those elements into a compelling villain.
Yeah.
But yeah, go on.
And I think it's important to kind of go over this just because, like I said, you have a familiarity with the subject matter, and that makes it more interesting and more poignant than other works on the same subject. I mean, there's the whole left-wing conceptions like, ooh, evil Nazis, terrifying, et cetera, whatever. But none of them ever go beyond the surface to kind of see just how weird and crazy it really gets. I mean, I have stories from my involvement in the alt-right that, like, if I put them down in, like, if I put this down in, like, a short story collection or, like, a novel or whatever, send it off to a publisher, it would get rejected for being too on the nose. But this stuff actually happened. I keep going back to the gay Satanist thing. I'm sorry if that's a bit too prurient, but like that stuff is real. It happens, and it's far funnier than what the average person conceives as what this movement was or is all about. I remember about a year ago I was on the alt-right podcast, Alt WRIT, hosted by Bibles of Expat Press, and I kind of got into some of these ideas here. It's like everyone has nobody really goes beyond the surface to really penetrate as to how crazy this gets, and it's the kind of thing that makes, as Dragon Day shows, it makes for a pretty funny and interesting story. Oh yeah, no, it's. Not to sound too queer myself, but it's high queer art. Some of the stuff that gets, some of the things that actually happen, and some of the stuff that people say, and some people's online presence in it. By the way, as an aside, I mean, you have this, Jack from the Perfume Nationalist being an example of someone who is gay and right wing, but not fucking crazy. So this is just as a disclaimer, it's not all the stuff that I would highlight as like destructive or bad. A lot of it is very interesting. Jack is cool. Go check out the Perfume Nationalist. But sorry, Matt. Continue. No, definitely. As you said, this stuff, it really is out there, and it's so much more interesting than pretty much anything else like going on in the world. To me, anyway, as someone living in the United States. I kind of fell into this stuff again after college. And I've always, a lot of people, as you said, they fall into it and they're very vulnerable individuals, and it leads them, into bad stuff. It definitely happens. I've always tried to reflect my experiences of getting interested in stuff online in a creative way through this novel or other creative
outlets of mine, and I always try and turn it into a positive. But it just, again, not to sound too queer, but it's been it ended up being, I started the novel years before getting into it, but years before becoming interested in the dissident right. But once I became interested in it, in around 2018, it became my muse, so to speak, to finish the novel. And I think that, yeah, I mean, I to get more into my process of writing it, I did, it's kind of embarrassing to say this because it's only about 130 pages, but it took me about 7 years of on again, off again writing, not straightforward labor, but actually like, having life experiences, setting that down, coming back to it. Do you get what I'm saying?
I've been working on a novel myself for about 3 years now. So I can kind of relate. I mean, though there is a limit. I mean, Jordan Castro, who of Tyrant, once joked that if it took you 10 years to write a novel, all that proves is that you're an alcoholic.
Yeah, probably. In my case, I don't know if it proves that I'm an alcoholic, but it definitely proves that there was a lot of false starts and that I had a lot of life going on, school, finishing school, moving, etc. And but I like the amount of time it ended up taking because it allowed me to kind of come back to put it this way in a neat little box. When I started the novel, I was the age of Toby, the protagonist, 19, and when I finish it, I'm 26, the age of a character called Charles, who's the narrator, who's kind of the more the voice of reason in it. So that they kind of closed a loop for me of growing from about the age of 18 or 19 to 26. So the timeline ended up working out. And just to finish the thought, yeah, I started it kind of just writing about my college experience and ended up, the last few years where I really wrote the novel, inflecting all this stuff from online and all the perspectives from the dissident right and various other outlets online. That's what completed the novel. A book about me being a sad college student would not have been interesting. A book that is about that, but then has the perspective of, a political movement online, as well as I think a good amount of legitimate social thought and philosophy, is something I'm very proud of.
Yeah, I certainly think it's a good book, and you should all go buy it. But I wanted to kind of, this is one question I did want to ask you over the course of the interview. What are your literary inspirations? Who are the writers you kind of who had the most influence on you, and also had influence on Dragon Day? You've obviously talked about the alt-right element, but you have name checked other writers. You've mentioned Andy Nowicki to me, and James Newlick, author of Valencia and The Moon Down to Earth, has also blurbed Dragon Day. His blurb is featured on the back cover in beautiful 14-point font.
Yeah, no, I definitely enjoy Nowicki and Nowlick both. I can't say that they've influenced my writing style that much because I got into them more or less after formulating that writing style. I'll answer this by way of an anecdote. I again used to be very much a normie individual. In high school, I was one of those white David Foster Wallace fans that BuzzFeed girls warn you about, I guess. And I have this. I've always been.
You can't date him if he has infinite jest in his book.
Exactly. So I would have been toast if I'd continued on that track. But I've always been interested in things that are sort of like the opposite. And maybe this even is reflected in the book in other ways too. I've always been interested in things and their opposites. I'm interested in the far left, the far right, etc. Also as applied to literature. So a big moment for me in the course of my, I guess, career as a reader and someone influenced by other writers came when Bret Easton Ellis did a magnificent takedown of David Foster Wallace circa 2015. When whatever movie about David Foster Wallace came out. He did a takedown of him and the whole cult of the nice guy and neo-sincerity surrounding him. And being, I guess, a bit of like a cuck Wojak or whatever with the gaping mouth back then, I was like, oh my God, he can't. I was like, I won't say I was offended by it, but I didn't agree with Bret Easton Ellis immediately. But then the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Bret Easton Ellis that I basically agreed with him more in terms of his outlook as to what literature should be than David Foster Wallace. And pretty basic bitch thing to say, but Brett Ellis is definitely a huge influence. American Psycho was a big influence. One of the biggest, one of the early inspirations for the book was actually the business card scene in American Psycho, where they're comparing business cards, and the protagonist becomes infuriated.
Even has a water.
Everyone probably knows this scene who's seen it. And there's little scenes like that in the book about the dynamic of social aggression and trying to measure up, which is quite literalized in the book. Was interesting to me. So those kinds of themes explored in Bret Easton Ellis were a big early influence. And then even just in terms of writing, I started to read all of Bret's work. Later got on to Dennis Cooper, who would absolutely hate to hear me say it because I gather he's pretty far left politically, but definitely a big influence on me. Frankly, a lot of gay writers, a lot of gay novelists. Mishima. I don't necessarily claim that much of an influence from Mishima stylistically, but definitely like just his life and his being is a major inspiration of mine. So I would say those three: Mishima, Dennis Cooper, Bret Easton Ellis were major literary influences, and kind of helped me break out of the whole David Foster Wallace like pretentious shit mode that I think a lot of especially like white guy writers fall into.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Dennis Cooper because I'm not familiar with his work. You know, he's probably a good writer, probably a nice guy. He was going to do an interview on Terror House magazine, but he listened to the podcast and he was like, "Fuck no, I can't be associated with this." So,
there you go.
But no hard feelings, Dennis. You're welcome to reconsider. Funny you mentioned Mishima as well, because Mishima is a common figure of admiration among kind of the figures you kind of analyze in Dragon Day. You know, Mishima is a guy who most people know him for the coup attempt he made in 1970, which was basically just a pretense for him to have a ritual suicide, which kind of. This is something I wanted to bring up earlier when we were discussing kind of the mentality of these people, but I forgot about it. One of the big motivators, this goes back to my Australian former friend who was involved with the neo-Nazism when he was a teenager. One of the things he pointed out in regards to, a lot of gay men have kind of like this romantic mindset where they're attracted to doomed causes, mainly because they're not interested in the cause itself. It's something that allows them to live a kind of dramatic life. You know, if you attach yourself to a movement or a philosophy that has no chance of succeeding, it allows you to kind of play up the emotions, etc. And that's in many ways what Mishima did. I don't want to sound like I'm denigrating what I've read of Yukio Mishima. I like, he was sounded like a pretty cool cat when he was a pretty interesting figure, but. He had to have known launching that coup attempt that it was not going to succeed. I think it's pretty obvious that he only did that because as a pretense to have the ritual suicide, which kind of does fit in with this whole mentality of attraction to doomed romantic causes.
Oh, yeah, no, I would agree with that. I don't think it's necessarily disparaging Mishima at all. I mean, the man was clearly an artist and identified as such and writer. And and as far as he was a political thinker and figure, he mostly contributed to that, in an artful manner, so to speak. So I don't think it's necessarily to denigrate his work at all. I think it's just to understand where he was coming from. And I would say it was very much a doomed cause, but he felt the need to
make a statement.
Exactly. What the relation between that and my book? Obviously, my book also, and again, not to spoil anything, but I think it's laid out right from the get-go that the book ends with an explosion, with a sort of terrorist attack.
Yeah, it's not really spoiling anything. It's revealed in the introduction.
Yeah, no. So that also the Mishima and what we might term the Cult of Mishima had its influence on that as well.
Yeah, I can, I can definitely see that. And you kind of, one of the more interesting, I guess, creative, things you talk about in the book, at least in the beginning, is this is what attracted my eye to the book when you first sent an excerpt of the book to be published at Terror House Magazine a year ago, and the first paragraph, and the excerpt is from the first chapter, and the first paragraph is the main character just kind of obsessing over and fretting about his penis, and it's like it's not big enough, and he's insecure, and he's just staring at it in the mirror. I don't know why. Like, well, I read that and was like, oh yeah, I gotta run this. This is fucking hilarious.
Yeah, well, I was taught, a lot of the shit I learned in college is garbage. But one good thing I learned from creative writing teachers is you have to start your story with a bang. And I think I achieved that with this novel. Because it just starts with Toby, as you said, staring at his own dick in the mirror and feeling inadequate, which is pretty much the status quo that the book enters onto. And obviously it's a very colorful way of exhibiting that.
Yeah. It's I mean, you're younger than I am, so you're definitely coming at it from a slightly different perspective. But I do relate a bit to some of what you discuss. Like the book goes into like it's set in 2015, like just before all this happened with like Trump, kind of the Trump campaign and all this mass acceleration of wokeness. But you do go over into like the kind of the beginning stirrings of this culture, this confrontational culture of proto cancel culture and all this, which is something that's interesting to look at, because it almost feels like a different world. I mean, it was only 6 years ago, but like it feels like an eternity ago. Hell, like 2 years ago feels like an eternity.
Oh yeah, it certainly does, especially with coronavirus. That's changed everything again. Trump changed everything, and then COVID changed everything. But yeah, no, I think probably many writers might go through this. Like I struggled with like when to set this novel, but at around 2018 or so, it became very obvious that 2015 was the time. I mean, that's basically the year when I was the age that Toby is. So that makes sense. But also, as you said, it's a very distinctive time in history. And I think it's one that I'll remember throughout my life as a very distinctive moment in history, because my impression, and I tried to give words to this somewhere, is that kind of both sides of the aisle, right? Both the proto-cancel culture, or in many ways it was very much in full swing, cancel culture and wokeness. I still remember the first time the Facebook, my Facebook friends posting about like, cis, able-bodied, this, that, and the other thing. That was all in 2015. It was totally foreign to me at the time. Now it's commonplace, but that stuff was really having a field day. It was, running rampant. BuzzFeed was huge. I'm sure you remember Everyday Feminism and seeing those articles pop up if you were on like normie Facebook. That stuff was growing, and it felt like it was growing in power. But on the other hand, and I actually was unaware of this at the time, but my impression is that it was also the absolute golden age for the dissident right and for the manosphere. I mean, would you agree, Matt? You're more familiar with.
I'd say yeah, that was kind of when the whole thing peaked. I mean, I'd say the manosphere had been dead for like years before that, but
maybe the manosphere peaked.
In terms of trolling and just having fun, like 2015, 2016 was the peak. I mean, 2015 was a really bad year for me. I mean, I'm not going to get into the details. Some people who know my biography can probably guess why. 2016 on the other hand was a great fucking year. It's like, again, it feels like an eternity ago that you could just log onto Twitter and call blue checks the F word, the other F word, one I can't say on YouTube. That you could cause them to lose their fucking minds. It seemed like that we were having an actual effect on the culture. Plus, that year was great because I was getting paid to drive around the country going to Trump rallies. That was pretty fucking awesome. That was the high watermark. 2017 was when it all came crashing down.
Oh, for sure. And I unfortunately, maybe I am attracted to doomed causes like Mishima because that's right around the time I first really got online, and I missed the fun part, I guess. But yeah, no. The interesting thing is, I think both sides really felt like they were winning at that time, and they hadn't yet kind of met in the middle and really started. This all really came to a head with Trump, and then basically, not to speak too conspiratorially and not to speak too broadly, but basically the establishment, whatever that means, just shut down the dissident right after Trump, is my impression. So
yeah, that's when obviously there was censorship going on before, but that it didn't really ramp up until after Trump was elected, and it's just gone up in stages and stages and stages, and now we live in an environment where the Twitter trending is completely faked. Good right-wing accounts are getting banned left and right. You can't. You basically can't speak the truth. We've got this week all those emails from Fauci that have been released under FOIA, basically confirming that every fringe right-wing nut job a year ago is absolutely right about him and absolutely right about what happened with the virus. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because reality has been remolded, reshaped according to what the people at the top want.
Yeah, no, I try not to quote this guy too much because I think he's a little silly, but that filmmaker Adam Curtis, he had that movie HyperNormalization was, I think, the word, and certainly post-COVID, everything feels like it's entered into this phase where we're living in a I guess the right-wing way of saying this is clown world. We're just living in a non-serious world where everyone knows the official narrative is fake, left, right, and center. But anyway, but contrast that with 2015, when on both sides there was this sense of change in the air, and things were very fertile. Things felt very fertile, and there was a life to it. That is the feeling I wanted to capture in the novel, because that was an exciting time to be alive. For as bad as a lot of it may have been, and for as bad as a lot of it ended, the kind of fertile feeling in the end of that time was where I knew I wanted to set my novel, because it was going to be about esoteric, sort of subterranean things actually happening, and not just getting shut down, and not just being stuck in your house for an entire year because of COVID. Obviously, I'm not going to write about that. It's like I wanted to go back to that time when it felt like social mobilization and change was possible.
Yeah, this is all the shit I got up to was fucking hilarious. I remember the time that I went to see Milo speak in Chicago, and it was shut down by a bunch of Black Lives Matter protesters on the campus. And as we were all leaving, there was some fat chick who was, with the protesters. I just yelled at her, "You need to lose some weight, honey." And she tried to grab my phone out of my hand while screaming and calling me a racist. I filmed the whole thing, and it was fucking hilarious.
Yeah, no, it's all this stuff that we joke about now, but it was very much real back then. But again, I can't really speak to this. I was just in my bubble, learning about Heidegger or whatever. Well, not Heidegger is obviously a politically charged reference, but you know what I mean. I was a college student. I wasn't very much online.
Yeah, you had shit to do in the real world.
I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah, and that on one hand, I think in terms of overall content, I think the quality has kind of gone up from a literary perspective. We're living in a really good era now for novels and alternative music and that kind of thing. You've got Shooter, Eggy, you got the works being put out by Terror House, obviously, but also say Expat Press, Misery Tourism, Mystery Grove, etc. That's all well and good, but that energy of 2015, 2016 is not coming back. That energy did produce a lot of cringe. If you remember those god awful Walt Bismarck parodies, but those did not age well at all. But that energy, that just sheer Schadenfreude of feeling at least that you're fucking with power is just never going to come back. Probably not in our lifetime.
Yeah, never say never, but I definitely agree it doesn't look good. But you bring up an interesting point. Yeah, it is a better era. Like the podcasts and the memes and novels in the case of Terror House. They are getting better. And that brings it back to Mishima a little bit. It's like when you can't when your ideas are part of a doomed movement, when you can't actually affect real world political change, like it sucks, but also it can be, you can put your energy elsewhere in a more artful direction. So that's, I guess, the little compensation prize.
Yeah, I mean, you can redirect it to something semi useful. To kind of move off this topic. What kind of, do you have any new books, literary projects lined up? I'm sure a lot of people will be excited to read what you have coming up next after they buy Dragon Day and consume it in one sitting and are left wanting more. By the way, buy it when it comes out.
Absolutely, yeah. It's been all the while writing Dragon Day. It's like, am I going to write a second novel? I'm still not 100% sure. I think I will. I just don't have any novel ideas at the time. But my plan would be to get back to, I guess, what you could call sort of my roots, because I think it's the way a lot of writers start, by writing some short stories and going back to that medium. Hopefully, I will publish more with Terror House and other friendly online publications. But I do admit I'm not in the full swing of any projects right now. I'm very much, this is, again, it's 7 years of my life put into this thing. Not continuous work by any means, but 7 years of like experience. And I am not 100% sure what comes next, but I will definitely keep writing.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I can get that. I mean, like I said, I've got the novel that I, put to the side for like 3 years, and I'm working on a poetry collection now that I, am slowly heading towards the, the finish line on. I started that about a year ago, and I'm kind of in the, I'm kind of in the editing stage now, where I just want to trim it down and get it as good as possible. Then send it out to some of my writer friends for feedback, and who knows, maybe you'll all see the light of day on that by Christmas.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. Yeah, I used to write poetry as well. Maybe I'll dip back into that. But yeah, no, it's very much blue sky for me.
I mean, I used to have a mentality of focus on quantity. I mean, I was a blogger for many years. I mean, the whole nature of blogging is that it rewards those who frequently put out content. Particularly now, I mean, blogging is a dead industry, but in order to rank on, say, YouTube and whatnot, you have to, in order to have your site in general just get picked up in Google, you have to publish content every day or close to it. But as I've gotten older, like, I want to put out less and less into the world, and what I want to, and what I do want to put out there, I want to be, timeless or close to it. Like, the next time I publish something, be it a poem or whatever, I want it to be as good as it can be. And if that only happens like once or twice a year, I'm perfectly happy with that. I'd rather have one or two really good works to my name than just like an entire ocean of stuff that's mediocre at best.
For sure. No, I agree with you. Like, definitely the internet in general, and seemingly more and more every year, rewards quantity and constancy of putting stuff out. And I've tried to dip into that. I have never been able to like become like a blogger. Like, I'll post a blog post, and that I can pump one of those out. Like, it takes months, and I don't think it's a work ethic issue. I think it's just I get very interested in one idea, and I pursue it, and I obsess over it. And I just, my pace is, my timing is very slow, but it makes it very hard to do this stuff on the internet. But the great thing about books, is that they really have that sense of permanence, especially if you publish it in physical form. I mean, you put it out in the world. Like, I'll say this, I definitely plan on writing more, but I also know that if I never did write anything again, I'd still have written one book. Which is like, with a blog, it's like every post has to be like leading to the next one. And I find, as a when it comes to creative stuff, putting as much as I can towards one thing, and then if it's once, one thing I'm proud of a year, I'd rather have that than, because I'm just
how many people are going to fondly remember a blog 10 years later? Like, that number is pretty small.
Yeah, there's like a few blogs that might apply to, but I'm too much of a perfectionist, perhaps, but that's I'd rather slave over stuff and have like a very slow output.
I have an older friend who kind of put it like this. He was an arts editor for Newsweek before he retired 10 years ago. Before the internet started, there was a natural limitation as to how much a writer could write because you had to get published in a book or newspaper or magazine or whatever. There was just a natural limit to how much you could produce over the course of your lifetime. The internet removed this restriction, which was a good thing in that it allowed many voices who would otherwise be shut out to have a voice. But at the same time, it introduced a new problem. You could write yourself out because there's no one stopping you. There's no institutional barriers stopping you from writing as much as you want. And eventually, even if you have like ideas or stuff you want to go over, it could just be you could just get to the point where you've just had enough and you just don't want to do it anymore. Like my friend kind of hit that point because he was working at Newsweek, but he also ran an arts blog on the side, and eventually he just got to the point where it's like, okay, I've had enough. I mean, I've been doing this my entire life. I just don't have anything more to say. I mean, I might have more things to say, but I've said everything I want to say, and I'm just done. Which I think is something that happens to a lot of people now with this concept of being written out, due to the fact that there's no barriers to entry anymore. I mean, what do you think about that, Matt?
Yeah, no, what are the long-standing bloggers? Like everyone, it's not necessarily a bad thing. There's a cycle to all of this, but everyone eventually, kind of writes himself out and usually kind of departs for greener. I'm talking about blogging here. Delicious Tacos has been at it for about 10 years, and I would say shows no sign of slowing down and is putting out novels. But he's probably the exception that proves the rule. I think a lot of people end up burning out when they're, when they get when they're writing on one topic and they just, put stuff out. But there's always a natural life cycle to
I recall he was on a podcast like years ago, and he said that when he started his blog, like everything on his blog in like the first year that he'd done it was stuff he had written like over the years. Like he just obsessively wrote for like a year, and he just published that over the course of I think 2012 before he started moving on to new material. So he's being motivated in a far different direction. I mean, I don't even really consider him a blogger in the sense. He's basically his blog is basically just him publishing short stories. Like it's basically just a novel in website format in many ways.
Yeah, so that's why he's more of an exception to it. But you, Matt, not to make it too personal, but I mean, your web presence has been interesting because I think you've mastered the art of kind of going from one thing to the next, not in like a non-committed way, but I think you've, and again, I'm a little bit of a Johnny come lately to some of this, but it's interesting that you were involved with the Manosphere and the Dissident, right? And now you're into publishing. Like it seems like you've kind of been able to hit the crests of different scenes and different eras of like effective online activity.
Well, I mean, my interests have just drifted and changed over the years. I mean, the Manosphere was the big hot thing, about 10, 11 years ago. That was really cool, and it died. Then the Dissident Right and Gamergate came along, and that was pretty cool, and my personal perspective is that I'm just done with politics and any kind of blogging or current events, whatever. It goes back to the whole concept. On that subject, at least, I'm written out. I don't have anything else to add, and the rewards for doing so are pretty slim now. I mean, obviously, the opportunity cost for being politically active is much higher than it was 5-10 years ago with doxing and deplatforming and all of that. But even still, it's like, I mean, if you want political commentary so much, you could go to, I don't know, Ethan Ralph or Nick Fuentes or someone like that who's like much better at it and much more successful. I just don't have an interest in doing that. I want to, when I first started blogging back in 2009, like my ambition was to be a novelist. It wasn't to be some kind of pundit. Like I just kind of started doing this because I, was kind of bored, and I'm happy right now that I kind of get to live my dream. I'm helping novelists and poets and stuff, get their work out to their greater audience, and I'm able to work on creative work myself. That's I'm living the dream, or as close to it as I can.
That is the dream. And no, I think to bring it back around a little bit what you were saying before, I mean, I think there's an art to knowing when you're written out on a given subject and moving on to the next thing that interests you, because you can't force it. You know, when you're really working at something every day, you can't force it. Actually, I'll take the opportunity to pitch this here. I don't know if I'll actually go through with this, but I mean, I realized over the past few months that like I've been trying to get more into classical music and more sophisticated stuff, but I just have this extensive knowledge of like indie rock and all that from 2015 and prior. And I'm toying with the idea of starting a sort of anti-pitchfork music.
Oh, this is gonna be fun. Great.
Yeah, no, I don't know if I really have the time or the bandwidth to do that right now, but like that's the kind of thing I'm thinking. Like I'm a little, I put a lot of myself into Dragon Day, and maybe what's next is writing about something like a lot less serious and just reflecting on some of that older music, which I know you have a knowledge of as well. And I actually would love to bring you onto Robert Stark's podcast to maybe do a show on Pitchfork era, because not to veer this conversation off towards that, but there's a lot of, I think that's
that would be great. I mean, I've been tuned out of that world for many ways for at least since 2015, 2016. This happened to me recently. Like St. Vincent released her new album, Daddy's Home, and I'm on her mailing list for some reason, and I got an email about her upcoming tour, and I clicked on it, and one of the dates was at the Pitchfork Music Festival, and I clicked on that, and I looked at we're going to be performing at Pitchfork, and I recognized like 4 or 5 of them. And it's like, yeah, I'm fucking old. No. I recognize Animal Collective, St. Vincent, RK, Badu, whatever her name is. There was a couple others that Waxahachie, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, no, that's kind of the moment I'm hitting out with it too. And now a lot of the music that I was very into in my late teens, early 20s, it's like, well, that was an era that we're now far removed from. And like reflecting on that, and also reflecting on the newer output from artists from that time and how it's received in a very different way. And some of these artists are like totally canceled now as well. And reflecting on that, I think if you've ever read the blog Soiled Cinema,
I read that occasionally.
Yeah, old school, not old school, but like from 2009, I think it was started. Just like a very snarky sort of take, and very, very right wing, more right wing than I am. But anyhow, take on movies and movies from mostly like the 70s. Well, movies from all periods. And it occurred to me, in my thinking of like what comes next for me creatively, I was like, well, I could probably hit out, a few dozen just blog posts reflecting on like the Smashing Pumpkins and Red House Painters, and just what those music acts meant in their time, and what they mean now. I think is a topic I could write. I think sometimes as a writer, to bring this background, I think sometimes as a writer, you just have to know like what you can write about, because you can express yourself by writing about a real variety of topics.
Oh yeah, and it should be a case where I guess you let the muse lead you around and not force it, But yeah, if you go for that project, it's definitely something I'd be interested in. Just to kind of, for nostalgia from that era, and also just kind of to, laugh at Pitchfork.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'll have to. Now I've said it on a live stream, so now maybe it's that much more real. We'll see.
Yeah. Anyway, we're at about the hour mark, and ordinarily this would be the point where I read the questions that we have gotten, which people can ask by going to streamlabs.com/terrorhouse magazine. However, the cheapskates who are listening to this have not sent a single penny, so there are no questions. Maybe we'll get one while we're still on air. I've got, since this is running on a time delay. So, guys, if you're listening to, stop being cheap and send in some questions for Matt or myself. But yeah, to kind of cycle things back around, Dragon Day will be out on Friday. That is June 4th. We will have pre-orders open tomorrow. Those of you who are listening to this live will benefit from this, go to terrorhousepress.com and sign up for the newsletter, and you will get a coupon code tomorrow that'll allow you to pre-order the book at a pretty significant discount. It's a reward we get that you get for signing up to the mailing list and being subjected to my hip and fantastic stylings every month. Matt, is there anything else you want to add? Any other topics you want to bring up?
Nothing comes to mind at this point. I can give that some thought if no one's asking questions. It doesn't shock me that no one would have questions, but
well, we got a decent number of chats on previous streams. I think the most successful one we did since going to a live format was with Andy Nowicki, but then again, I guess that makes sense.
He does. He's been at this for years. And
we also had Eris co-hosting, and she's pretty popular for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, go check out Dragon Day when it comes out, Terror House Press, follow us and all that stuff. Matt, is there anything else you'd like to plug? Anything else you'd like to the fine people in the audience to check out?
Well, definitely buy the book, as we've plugged. Please do follow me on Twitter. My handle is @mpegs. That's MPEGZ 696 on Twitter. I have a Substack with, again, as I was saying earlier, I'm not much of a blogger, but I have a couple posts and will continue to post on there.
There's also an excerpt of Dragon Day there if you want to check it out. There's also the one, obviously, we published on Terror House. That's linked in the show notes.
Yeah, that's worth noting. If you're on the fence about buying the book, definitely check out the excerpts. One's been posted to Terror House. One's been posted to my Substack, particularly the one on Terror House, which is basically the opening of the book. And as we noted earlier, it opens up with a bang. You should know whether or not this book would be interesting to you if you've read that. So definitely check that out.
Yeah, excellent. So go follow him on Twitter. Go check out his Substack. Buy the damn book, etc. And as for me, well, you can always find all my stuff at mattforney.com. And Bryden, the links to Bryden's website and his Trovo and DLive channels are in the description. He streams pretty regularly. He's a real hoot. Anyway, that will do it for this episode of Terror House Radio. Be sure to check out Terror House Magazine every day for our publications. Books are at terrorhousepress.com. The MP3 version of the show will be live shortly after the live broadcast concludes, and you can always find that and all the past episodes of the show at terrorhouseradio.com. Terror House Radio is produced by Bryden Proctor and presented by Katya Deg. Intro music by Zero Pulse. Illegitimate non-coverundum. Don't let the bastards grind you down. I'm Matt Forney with Matt Pegas, and we are out.